It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah, baby. This week's episode is going to be groundbreaking. We are going to talk about edit points, button and stinger endings, and developmental arcs. All in this episode. I'm going to play you examples and show you waveforms. It will all become crystal clear. Little more technical than I'm used to, so hopefully that goes well. I think I've got everything worked out. Let's see. Wow, Greg Carroza's in the room. Everybody's here. The gang is all here. Let me double check, make sure that I am in fact broadcasting. Please pop up. There I am. Okay. So, you guys are getting me, right? Yep, good. Yay. Hey, Alan Hall, how are you? Good to see you. Okay, that's good. Whoa. Loud and clear. Greg has to go soon, probably. All right. I've got to say, I finally figured out how to pull in a... Oh, no, there's a truck backing up out there. Beep, beep, beep. Anyway, I finally figured out how to get a live web page into my broadcasting software. But to do this... Greg, you're out in 10 minutes. Dude. Anyway, I couldn't do everything live because if I did, it would show private information, about the music library and stuff. So what I did was I took these waveforms and these tracks, instrumental tracks, and treated it like a live shoot, made videos out of them and put them in my timeline here so I can play them. So I will still be able to talk over these, but you're going to see me sitting here last Friday. I was going to wear the same shirt today and try and fool you guys. Then I remembered I got a haircut over the weekend, so that wouldn't work. Okay, are you guys ready? Will everybody please be... attentive today, because there's a lot of nuance in this music. That's my main reason for wanting you to pay such close attention. These tracks are all from a really excellent library. If you, for some reason, go, oh, that's my track, I know whose library, please don't spew it out there, because, ultimately, like somewhere between 800 and a couple thousand people could see this video, and they're not all Taxi members. They're not all you guys. So, all right, here we go. So the first thing we're going to listen to, please, dear God, let this work, is a track, a sports rock track called Break Your Limits. Listen for edit points. I'm going to be talking through it, so I'm going to point this stuff out. Developmental Arc, which is accomplished by adding and subtracting new instruments and parts as it moves forward. The middle section, in this one, in all these, this library tends to prefer B sections that are pretty much A sections, but a little different, whereas some libraries want B sections that might have a chord progression flipped or something like that. These are more like A section variation on a theme. It breaks down to basics in this one, then progressively builds back up. Ends with a stinger ending. Anyway, let's see if I can make this work. Here we go. I'm a little nervous. All right, here we go on the first one. This is for a sports rock instrumental track. It's called Break Your Limits. And things I'd like you to listen for are edit points, the developmental arc, which is accomplished, obviously, by adding and subtracting new instruments and parts as it proceeds forward. And in the middle, a B section in the same motif as the A section. It breaks down to the basics, then progressively builds back up and ends with a stinger ending. I'll play it all the way through and then go back and maybe play some sections to point out specifics. So here we go. This is Break Your Limits. Edit point. B section. Still in the same motif. This could be used all by itself. And back to the A. That little drum turn could be used, you could come in with that pickup and use that as the end point if you just want to use this end section. Building. Stinger ending, bump, 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 bump. You could just use bump, 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 or you could just use bump. But that's a stinger ending. I personally think of a stinger as an exclamation point at the end of something. If it sounds more like a period, to draw that analogy, I would probably call it a buttoned ending. So I tend to think of stingers as boom, making an exclamation point, versus a period making a button ending. All right, let's go back and listen. Let's see if I can get this to cooperate. There we go. Let's see if I can get this to stop. It's a little tough. I might add that it's really hard. I'm running a web page through a live web page playing video through a video editing software right now. So it's a little bit tough to be accurate in my stops and starts. But anyway, I'm going to start it here, and you'll hear how using that edit point, we could come right in on this downbeat and forget that whole intro. Okay, we get the idea. Now let's go down here. This was an interesting point. Bum, ba-dum, ba-dum. If I were an editor, I would anticipate where I need that downbeat to hit when the scene comes in. Maybe I'm doing an act out from the scene before. Maybe there's some sort of transition. But I think that would be a great edit point. You could do it either way. You could do it like this. Again, a little clunky. So you could use dump, ba-dump, ba-dump, or you could just come right in on the downbeat of the guitar and use that. So there you go. Also, I should mention, if you look at that whole waveform and you're an editor, you go, okay, I can see the dynamics in there. I can see the B section clearly, like dead center in the middle of this thing, and the B section has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 little subsections within there. And if you look really carefully, you might be able to make the argument that the last third of it just by looking at the waveform. Yeah, maybe I'm not right about that. But though that's part of the developmental arc. Does it have sectional contrast? Does it have dynamic contrast? Again, let's go listen to the intro for a second. Oops, it's not letting me go all the way back. There we go. You could leave this part out, arguably. Or you could hit play and nothing happens. I don't need this intro, right? I'm thinking as the editor. And so I might just start it right there, and that use the slide in. Edit point right there. You don't always need to have a rest to have an edit point. Cut it right there in that beat, and then you could find somewhere where you want to come in on that same beat that's closer to the end and take out the whole middle section. Maybe you only need 17 sections of this whole piece. That's how video editors come up with musical edits to time out to the video that they have. Because they don't always start. They rarely, frankly, start at the beginning and let them run all the way out. That practically never happens. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. Okay, here I am, back live. What'd you guys think? I could see you guys thought the track was great. It was excellent. In my opinion. And thank you very much to the library that is letting me use these tracks today. I really appreciate it. By the way, when you look at the waveform on everything we're going to look at today, now imagine that you're one of those people who is very obsessed with maximum level, and you compress your mix bus, and I see tracks all the time that come through here. Hang on, Chad, I'll let you know in a second. Where it's a brick wall, and you can't see any dynamics in the waveform. It's just straight across. If you were an editor and you were auditioning tracks, before you listen, remember the title gets them interested because it telegraphs what the track should or could potentially sound like. And then they're going to look at the waveform a lot of times. Almost any editor will tell you that they will look at the waveform. And what they're looking for is an arc, a developmental arc. They're looking for dynamics. They're looking for edit points. They're looking to see if the third section of it appears to be more dynamic than the first section in case they need something more dynamic. They like what they hear in the first section, but it's not quite strong enough. They're going to go for the bigger, fatter back end. So, if you've done a brick wall and your waveform is just even right across the top of the whole thing, they're going to look at that and go, next. They're never going to hear it. How do you like them apples? Okay. Question was, I saw a quick question. How long is an edit point? There is no such thing as how long is an edit point. I can't say, it's a 0.4 seconds. It's not. It depends on the tempo of the track. It depends how the track is written, what the percussion, the drums are doing. A lot of hip-hop tracks are brick walls. Maybe they shouldn't be. People are probably watching videos on how to make hip-hop, how to do hip-hop mixes, and they're not thinking about sync. They're thinking about releasing it on Spotify, radio, wherever, and that's true. All their competition out there is going to brick wall it. So maybe you need to learn to mix differently for sync. You want it to sound like it would sound on radio or on Spotify or whatever. I don't know what the tempo was of that track. No idea. there you go. But now you can see why it's important. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a track, also for sports rock, called Step Aside. Listen for edit points. Developmental Arc accomplished once again by adding and subtracting new instruments. Some of these, one of the reasons I want you to pay such close attention, there's some really subtle stuff going on. This library tends to favor tracks that are A section all the way through, but the B section is really just a variation of the A section, whereas some libraries, most libraries, I would venture to say, not that they ask for it that way, but I think that they expect that a B section is more like a bridge in a song, that obviously it goes with the rest of the track, but there's something about it. Tempo, instrumentation, a lot of things can vary in it. This library, a lot of the stuff I've heard from them, the B section really is just a breakdown of the A section. Okay, so now let's see. It has a cool B section. It's notable. It's the same motif, but features the drums. Then near the end of the B section, it increases intensity, progressively building back up, and then ends with a stinger ending. Notice that it ends after the stinger ending. It has a coda after a rest that gives the stinger all by itself. I don't know if the composer did that consciously to give the editor an easier way to grab a stinger. I would guess by the quality of these tracks I'm hearing, these people are pretty experienced and they would know to do that. I wouldn't recommend doing that on everything you do, though. All right, let's have a listen. This is called Step Aside. And I'm going to do some Q&A at the end, by the way. Okay, now we're moving on to a song or a track called Step Aside, also sports rock. Listen for the edit points, the developmental arc, which is accomplished, of course, by adding and sometimes subtracting new instruments and parts. And in the middle, it has a really cool B section. And it's notable that it's the same motif. Sometimes B sections, they could flip the chord progression, do other weird stuff, but these tend to be like the A section, just different treatment of the A section for the middle. But it really features the drums on this one a lot. And then near the end of the B section, it also increases the intensity progressively as it builds back up to come out of that, and then goes back into the A section, which builds up and then finally ends with the stinger ending. Notice that it ends with stinger ending, but it has a coda after a rest and gives the stinger all by itself, which really musically isn't necessary. But if you're an editor, that's really nice because the stinger's just sitting out there in the open and you can just take it and use it. So I'm going to play it all the way through and then maybe go back and play some sections to point out some specifics. Hopefully all the digital gizmos are working correctly. Here we go on Step Aside. Come on. Well, maybe we don't. There we go. By the way, these have longer intros than I personally think are necessary. That was an edit point. Coming up on the B section. There we are. still technically in the B section, but I like this. Whole different flavor, same motif. And we're coming up to another edit point, and I'm going to blast it. Again, with the drum flam and the slide, if I were the video editor, I would use those and have those anticipate the end point of my video scene. Really nice touch, whoever the composer is. Ascending creates a sense of excitement, tension, victory, all those things you want to imply in a sports rock track. And here comes. There we have the double stinger there. I don't know that I really need to go back and play anything again, but let me see if I can get it to zero in on this stinger. Just that much. You could use that. So you could take something all the way from up front and take out the whole majority of the music of that piece and just take something that brings you into the track, lasts for a few seconds or a couple seconds, and bump and hit it with that stinger, because you might only need a 3-second section for a particular video edit. For those of you who are new to the world of production music, it's extremely rare that they use an entire piece beginning to end. Extremely rare. It happens, but I hear about it once every 18 months, maybe. I'm sure I don't get a full report on every single one that happens all over the world, but you get the idea. They are extremely rare, and that's what video editors look for when they see a waveform like this. They're looking, does it have a lot of sections? Oh, I see that. It's got an intro. It's clearly got an A section, which is kind of has subsections. It's clearly got a B section, then it goes back to the A section. And if you look carefully at the waveform, you could make the argument that you can actually see the intensity of the dynamics increasing at the end. So you go, okay, it's got a beginning, a middle, an end. It offers me different options. I want to hear this piece. Then they hit play. So that's that little, 5-second walk around the waveform, visual walk around the waveform that most editors have told me that they do before they ever hit the play button. Okay, back live. How'd you guys like that one? Educational, huh? Yeah, honestly, I don't hear those double stingers a lot, and I'm guessing that both those tracks were done by the same composer. And, maybe that composer has just learned over time that if he includes a double stinger ending like that, that his stuff gets used more often. I don't know that that's a fact, so I am not recommending that everybody starts cranking out everything and every genre of music with a double stinger. Yay, Bobby Martin says he just learned so much already. Yeah, we talk about this stuff. And generally speaking, I've not been able to play music and have the waveforms and everything. There are reasons for it. Other than copyright reasons, there are other reasons as well. So I'm glad that this library was extremely generous in letting me use this stuff, and I'm glad that we could get the waveforms together. Everything is great. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our third track. This episode's going to be a short one unless we do a lot of Q&A at the end. Okay, so this one's a positive sounding pop rock instrumental called Friend's Passion. If I remember correctly, this one's got a lot of subtle stuff going on. So if you've got headphones, or maybe turn up your volume, notice you'll hear just a lot of little subtleties that take what otherwise might be very linear and boring and keep it moving forward, and gives the editor a lot of options, different sections with different dynamics, different instrumentation. And this one, by the way, Marion Laird, this one ends with what I would call a buttoned ending. And you'll see how that's different from a stinger ending. And forget about the double and single stingers. That means nothing. But again, I think I invented this phraseology. So, if other people are using it, they stole it from Taxi TV. But when it ends on a bump, that's a period. That's just going back to the tonic on the downbeat bump versus a stinger is Pete Townsend playing a chord. Okay, there you go. That's an exclamation point. All right, this is number 3, Friend's Passion. Here we go. Okay, now we're going to change things up a little bit with this one. This falls under the category of positive sounding pop rock. And it's called Friend's Passion. Some notes that I made about it. Most importantly, listen to the developmental arc of this and how it's accomplished by the subtle addition and subtraction of instruments and the parts they play, things like finger snaps being introduced, hand claps, second and third guitar parts, changing to double time in the second half of the first section, then going into the B section, which is a breakdown with no percussion. And see, normally somebody would take stems and create that, but by this already being there, you've given the editor an option to use without having to deal with taking stems and doing kind of their own mix. Not kind of their own mix, definitely their own mix. Then it goes back to the full A section, which builds back up as it heads for the hills. Note that the last few bars, the melody guitar drops out. So that gives the editors yet another option. It's basically, it's like the full mix without guitars. Whoever laid this track out knew how editors use stems, and they gave them a lot of options. So this is all an effort to make this track more usable. And yet so many people think, oh, I've got to have the best track. Well, the best track is the one that's the most usable. Nobody's trying to win any composition awards for a Billboard #1 or something. What defines best in the context of instrumental music for TV is what is the most usable. And this is a really usable track because the composer thought ahead. And also notice that it's A section all the way through. People are always saying to us, well, my track is really good. We hear great tracks, but they get very linear, very boring, very the same all the way through. Yet this is an A section all the way through, and it's anything but boring. Point out that the drum turnarounds could be used as pickups, like I've explained in the previous ones, where you go boom, ba-doom, boom, boom. Normally you might cut on, right in front of the downbeat on the boom coming into a new bar. But if you use the turnaround leading up to it, you could start the music before you get to that new video in point on the edit. Which makes it more interesting. You don't want things to start exactly where the music always starts exactly on the first frame. Also note on this one that the ending is more what I would call a button ending. Again, for as good as this track is, I don't love the way it ends. It's practical and usable and workable. Not all that creative, but it, who am I to say? Because whoever wrote this got everything else just so right. Anyway, it's more of what I would call a button ending, which is a period, versus an exclamation point, which I would call a stinger. Let's have a listen. This could be an edit point. Boom. Or you could use the drum turn. and anticipate a little. And watch how the instrumentation will change up a little here. Changing the hi-hat figure. I think there's a second guitar introduced. Now we're going into the B section. Same motif, just dropped out the drums and a lot of other stuff. Building it back up, creates forward movement. Again, a little change in the hi-hat. Where's that melody guitar? It's gone. Gives the editor an option. Should I play it one more time? This time I'll try not to talk through it. Comes the B section. Pay attention, please. I think that thing is just plain masterful. It may not be my favorite piece of music I've ever heard, but it ain't a hit record. But can't you just imagine how many different types of scenes this could be used in? It could be used in a corporate video. It could be used in a Plexiderm commercial, getting rid of the bags under your eyes. It could be used in a Hallmark movie about somebody going out and having a great day, a family leaving for vacation, just a bunch of different uses. And even that B section's got like 3 or 4 distinct sections within the B section. So you could take any one of those and loop it to make it longer if, let's say, you don't like the way the second part of the B section moves with your picture. This thing is an editor's dream, and I doubt that they would ever have to go to the stems to make good use of it. Whoever laid out this track, and I'm going to find out, is a genius. Congratulations. I'm back. Oh, man. I was watching all your comments. By the way, somebody mentioned clown music earlier. I'm prepared for all possible outcomes on today's show. Let's see, where was that question? Edmund had one. There we go. Are those all cues from taxi members? Just a library sharing some cues in their catalog? It's a library sharing cues from their catalog. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of the cues might have been created back some time ago, like years ago, by the library owner. But I know that there's a lot of music from taxi members in this library, a lot. So could very well be taxi members. When we run listings for emotionally upbeat, feel good, doesn't get more feel good than that. Let's see. Oh, by the way, I want to remind you guys, next week, I am actually flying into Boise, Idaho, and going to Matt Vanderbo's house in Nampa, which is a relatively short drive from the airport. And we're going to do Taxi TV live in his kind of like a family room, I guess, where he hosts like a dozen musicians for a monthly get-together. He's a mentor to a group of people from Nampa. They often come to the road rally. Anyway, it's going to be live, and there are a lot of ways it could melt down. I'm not bringing my little mixer with all my sound effects and stuff in. I think I figured out a way to get the opening and closing music and the hand claps in, but having 10 or 12 or 15 people on camera, I'm going to have the camera pretty far away from the group. Problem is, the microphone needs to be very close to the group. So did I order a 10-foot USB-B to USB-A cable today? And was that the longest one I could find? Why, yes, it was. So hopefully I'll get all that stuff worked out. Anyway, somebody talked about the title on that one. I got to say, I agree. Friends Passion. That tells you nothing. It tells you it sounds like Friends with Benefits or something. It really doesn't. It's a whoever was so masterful in creating that music didn't do such a great job at coming up with the title. Could have been called Summer Breeze or Off to the Islands. Who knows? Anything but Friends Passion. Stinko title. Sorry. Okay. Moving on. Now we're going to hear. I'm reading up here. Okay, I said this one's a tour de force that shows exactly how it's done. Sticking with one motif throughout and keeping it interesting moving forward. Let's just have a listen and we'll talk about this one afterwards. Back to basics. Here we go. Oh, I should check any more. Question. Not everybody's a titling master. Yeah, but ChatGPT and Grok are. All right, here we go. All right, here's another one. This is minimal piano percussion instrumentals. The track is called Back to Basics. You know how often Taxi says in its listings that you need to stick with one motif throughout, but keep it interesting and moving forward. I personally feel like this piece is a tour de force that shows exactly how that's done. I'm not sure if you could call any of the sections that you're going to hear truly a B section because there's no like inverted chord progression or anything that dramatic. Clearly there is a thing that if you want to call it a B section, you could. So I'm going to say that this piece does an amazing job of moving forward, sustaining and developing interest with an A section all the way through, which I think this library that I'm using for this tends to prefer their tracks that way. Anyway, A section all the way through, it gives the editors a bunch of great edit points and places they can start from. And also, notice how effectively the hand jive is used to make it fun and keep the developmental stuff interesting. I love the hand jive. This grabs your attention right from the first note, which is really important when you're trying to get an editor excited about using your piece. Notice it's not not a lot of instruments or instrumentation in this. Let's see. Great edit point at 16 seconds. I made a note. We'll try and point that out. Lots of great edit points. Check out the bass slide at 1:04. Could be used as a pickup. I'll try and point that out. Pickup coming into a scene. I've been stressing that all day today, that a lot of times the downbeat of the music does not start with the downbeat of a new scene. There's also a thing in editing or in TV production called a beat, and that is basically kind of like a thing that happens within a scene. A scene could be stuff taking place in somebody's house, but a beat might be when they walk into the kitchen. So that's a beat within a scene. Hope I'm getting, if any video editors are watching, I don't get corrected. So think about that, any chance you get to use a little slide down or slide up. Let's see. I actually made a note about this. A minute 4 could be used as a pickup coming into a scene where somebody does something or says something that would raise an eyebrow on an actor's face, like a reaction, like, really? Then bam, right into the meat of the motif. So I will try and remind you as we're listening. One thing I personally don't love about this track is the way it ends. It feels a little clunky, and it was like an afterthought to me. The rest of this is so spectacular, I thought that the end would be like, wow, but it's not. But it's good. It's workable and usable. Anyway, that's just one person's opinion. Think about this. Think of the movie Ocean's 11 or any of the Ocean's movies where they're scampering around the bowels of the hotel, hiding the gold or whatever they're doing. Could work for that. Be great for a TV commercial. Just very usable track. Hopefully I get it to play now. And once again, this is called Back to Basics. Good edit point there. I have to lean in looking for 104. Here it comes. That's a thing of beauty. Edit points galore in this baby. Oh man, I love that piece. As I was listening, I was thinking, there are people who go, oh, I got stuff in libraries, and I'm sure they're very good, competent composers. Obviously, good enough to get forwarded by taxi screeners. Obviously, good enough to get into a library, and many of them obviously good enough to get placed in commercials. But composition on this level is just. This is the difference between a lot of editors using your stuff and some editors using your stuff. All the little nuance that has gone into these tracks that are all from the same library And I know the person who owns the library pretty darn well, known him for a very long time. And I would imagine that there's some coaching that goes on. He finds the best composers he's got and then gives them some coaching. But this, in my opinion, is spectacularly good. Yeah, we're back live. I love that piece. There's just a million things he could use it for. And again, I made the point when I was talking at the end of that video that there are a lot of good tracks, really good tracks, great tracks. Only somebody with a trained ear, like we're doing right now, would know to look for these nuances. I think I've got the time. Would you guys like to listen to that one again one more time so you can really shut your eyes and listen to the nuances? Or do you want me to keep going and we'll go back to that one? Let me know. Okay. Then we shall. Let's listen to Back to Basics one more time. You're going to hear my comments again. Here we go. All right, here's another one. This is Minimal Piano Percussion Instrumentals. The track is called Back to Basics. You know how often Taxi says in its listings that you need to stick with one motif throughout, but keep it interesting and moving forward. I personally feel like this piece is a tour de force that shows exactly how that's done. I'm not sure if you could call any of the sections that you're going to hear truly a B section because there's no inverted chord progression or anything that dramatic. Clearly there is a thing that if you want to call it a B section, you could. So I'm going to say that this piece does an amazing job of moving forward, sustaining and developing interest with an A section all the way through, which I think this library that I'm using for this tends to prefer their tracks that way. Anyway, A section all the way through, it gives the editors a bunch of great edit points and places they can start from. And also, notice how effectively the hand jive is used to make it fun and keep the developmental stuff interesting. I love the hand jive. This grabs your attention right from the first note, which is really important when you're trying to get an editor excited about using your piece. Notice it's not not a lot of instruments or instrumentation in this. Let's see. Great edit point at 16 seconds. I made a note. We'll have to try and point that out. Lots of great edit points. Check out the bass slide at 1:04. Could be used as a pickup. I'll try and point that out. Pickup coming into a scene. I've been stressing that all day today, that a lot of times the downbeat of the music does not start with the downbeat of a new scene. There's also a thing in editing or in TV production called a beat, and that is basically kind of like a thing that happens within a scene. A scene could be stuff taking place in somebody's house, but a beat might be when they walk into the kitchen. So that's a beat within a scene. Hope I'm getting, if any video editors are watching, I don't get corrected. So think about that. Any chance you get to use a little slide down or slide up. Let's see. I actually made a note about this. A 1:04 could be used as a pickup coming into a scene where somebody does something or says something that would raise an eyebrow on an actor's face, like a reaction, like, really? Then bam, right into the meat of the motif. So I will try and remind you as we're listening. One thing I personally don't love about this track is the way it ends. It feels a little clunky and it's like an afterthought to me. The rest of this is so spectacular. I thought that the end would be like, wow, but it's not. But it's good. It's workable and usable. Anyway, that's just one person's opinion. Think about this. Think of the movie Ocean's 11 or any of the Ocean's movies where they're scampering around the bowels of the hotel, hiding the gold or whatever they're doing. Could work for that. Be great for a TV commercial. Just very usable track. Hopefully I get it to play now. And once again, this is called Back to Basics. Good edit point there. I have to lean in looking for 104. Here it comes. That's a thing of beauty. Edit points galore in this baby. Oh man, I love that piece. As I was listening, I was thinking, there are people who go, oh, yeah, enough of him. I've got to say, when I was making these videos on Friday, I took my microphone, which is for this stuff, it's an Audio Technica AT2020, which is like $120 microphone. And I usually have it about 18 to 20 inches away from me. But for the purpose of Friday's videos, and right now, it's about 9 inches away from me. I was so blown away by the sound of this mic when I listened back to those videos. And in case you didn't know it, Billie Eilish used this exact same microphone on her first album when she did everything in the bedroom. So if anybody's thinking about buying a $100 microphone, I heartily endorse the AT2020. I have a pretty, not enviable, but a pretty healthy mic selection going on right now, stuff that people have given me over the years. For a guy that doesn't do any more recording and has no studio, I don't need these mics, but I love collecting them, and someday I will use them again. Anyway, AT2020. Okay. It's a good cheap mic that doesn't sound like a cheap mic. That's the thing. Yeah, people were talking about a cajon being in that thing. I'm not sure there was a cajon. To me, it sounded like a floor tom. Tim Walker, send mics to Tampa, Florida. I'll pay shipping. That's very generous and kind of you, Tim. All right, let's move on. Let's see what else we've got on today's. Ooh, now we're coming up to dark thriller, trailer style instrumentals. I think I've got 2 of those. This one is called Future Depths. And I'm not going to tell you any of this stuff in here because I think I talked about all this while it's running. So as to not be redundant, let me just hit the play button and we'll have a listen. All right, now we're going to move into doing some dark thriller, trailer style instrumentals. These have a different developmental arc than a normal, like 90-second cue might. For movie trailers, there's this whole thing in the movie trailer world where they've got a first act, a second act, and a third act. The first act sets up and introduces the premise of what the movie's about and the characters. The second act is confrontation, which is introducing the conflict and like increase in action, sets the stage. And then Act 3 is a resolution where all that kind of comes together and builds to a climax and leaves the audience wanting more so that they go see the movie. Come on, we've all done that where we've leaned over and said to our spouse, ooh, that looks good, let's go see it, right? Well, that's the trailer's job. It's advertising. Technically, trailer companies are advertising agencies for the movie business. So this is a little different, but I think that there are certainly some good points to be made about editing and edit points and the developmental arc. Sorry, it's getting late. Excuse me. Sorry, did I just blow your ears out? Anyway, notice that when you look at this waveform, right now, look at that waveform. You can see the developmental arc just by looking at it. Editors will look at waveforms to see if there is an arc and if they're good edit points, which you can also see in here. And they'll, if they do see those things, they'll listen. If the first few seconds sounds like something that texturally, style-wise, tone-wise, vibe-wise, they think could work with what they're working on with that particular trailer, they'll listen all the way through and see what it has to offer sectionally. By the way, I should mention, a huge number of trailers, maybe the majority of trailers, it's not one piece of music that plays all the way through. I haven't asked any people I know in the trailer biz in the last 5 years about this, but prior to that, their reaction was almost always, oh yeah, we use 3, 4, 5 pieces of music. So they will take, Act 1 from that piece of music, Act 2 from another piece of music, Act 3 from another piece of music, and then maybe add sound design and effects on top of that to tie it all together and make it feel like it was from one person, one piece of music. Anyway, lots of edit points in this track, but take note that it's for trailers. So remember that. Notice the one big rest just before the third act. Okay. I don't know if you guys know. You can't see my cursor, I don't believe. Anyway, just before, I'll try and point it out to you. Looks like an editor's dream because see that big chasm about 2/3 of the way down the waveform? You would think any editor would get excited about that because it looks like you could drive a truck through there. How could you not use that as an edit point? But here's a rookie mistake that a lot of people make, and I only know this because I used to be a pretty high-level audio post person after I concluded the rock and roll record-making part of my career. And we didn't have waveforms back then, by the way. We didn't have computers. We edited on tape, like 2-inch tape and 1/4-inch tape with razor blades and little pieces of tape to hold everything together. But obviously that translates into this wonderful visual aid that you get with digital editing. And look at that. There's this chasm. Great place to edit. It's obviously right before the third act section. If you try and drop your electronic razor blade right in the middle of that thing to edit, it's going to be hard to hit it dead center. And if you look really carefully, you'll notice that the waveform swoops up ever so slightly on the right side of the chasm, whereas it drops down the left. So finding dead center on that, And if you find dead center, what you're going to get is some dead air before the beat comes in. So that's kind of worthless. You don't want dead air. You want it right on the beat. So we'll talk about that. And I'll go back and maybe play with it a little bit. I think that's all I had. Oh, no, I had more. Going back to the developmental arc for a minute, notice the ascending string glissando in the third act. It creates tension and impending catastrophe. I love that word. While dynamically accentuating the climax. So just listen. It's a subtle little thing, but all these subtle little things are what contribute to forward movement. When you see that in taxis listings all the time, make sure that it's got a developmental arc or to create forward movement. These are all the things that go into it. And I'm not saying copy every one of them. It's more important that you think about them and know where they would work best rather than ripping off or copying somebody else's style. I mean, let's face it, everybody uses bass slides, everybody uses string glissandos, but it's more important that you understand where they're needed and why they're needed there. With all that in mind, let us listen to a track called Future Depths. Here comes Act 2, grade edit point. Intensity's building. And there's the chasm. Ooh, that was early. Coming to theaters May 31st. All right, so it lived up to the promise just by looking at the waveform. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I left out of there. Impressive, right? And just tons of places to cut, tons of dynamic changes, a lot of subtlety being brought in with just different percussion, different synth parts. Really, really, really well executed. I am now going to move on to another trailer thing that I've got. So see you in a minute. How'd you guys like that one? I hope I made that point about the chasm. So many people, it frustrates me actually, over the years have said to me, what kind of rest should I use? Does an edit point have to be a rest? It doesn't, because you're not going to drop your electronic razor blade into the middle of that no waveform section of a rest. You're going to get that. Hold on. I actually have a razor blade in my office. No, it's not a leftover from the 70s. I use it to open packages from Amazon. But you're going to want to get that blade as he slices his... Oh, look at that. I've got no fingerprints. Now I can go out and commit crimes. You want to get it right up to the front of the downbeat. It doesn't have to be a downbeat. It could be anything. It could be a tambourine hit. It could be a kick drum. It could be a snare drum. It could be where the pick hits the first note of a guitar chord. Anything that's percussive, that back in my day we rocked the tape. Well, now you can see the waveform. It just makes it equally easy, maybe easier, I don't know. But get away from the concept that you need to build rests in. If it calls for a rest musically, do it. I guess that's my point, is don't put rests into things that feel like they're not musical. That was pretty intelligent, right? Don't put rests into things that where they're not going to sound natural and musical just because you're trying to create an edit point. So yeah, maybe you created a really obvious edit point for an editor that's not that musical and doesn't know that much about editing music. Yay, you created something that gives him a great visual aid, but if the piece isn't musical, that visual aid's not going to get used. So there you go. Okay, one more to go. This one is called Histrionics. Once again, the developmental track on this is clearly, you know what? I think I said all this stuff. Great example of a stinger ending in this one. I said plenty of edit points in this track, but once again, you don't have to create edit points in rests. Oh yeah, there's a super fast drum turnaround that could be a pickup. I've talked a few times today about pickups. Notice that music doesn't always start when you go into a new scene. Trying to think of any show where, boom, you edit to the first video frame of a new scene. That doesn't have to be the downbeat of the music. Could be that there's a whoa, what the heck just happened there? Could be there's a cross dissolve where you're fading out of one scene, fading into another, and that whole thing takes a half a second, maybe a second. So while that's happening, you could use a drum turnaround as a pickup or a bass slide. By the way, in the hand jive song, that bass slide, wouldn't that be great for somebody does something and somebody else turns and raises an eyebrow like, wow, dude, you just did that? Perfect for that. So think about all that kind of stuff. Those are the little nuances that make an exceptionally great track better and more usable than another track that is also great. Okay. Let's just play it. All right, we are on the last one, which is Histrionics. Here we go. Okay, this is the last one. I said that. This one's called Histrionics. Once again, the developmental arc of this track is so obvious just by looking at the waveform. The sectionality is there. Everything that you could imagine might get an editor excited and curious enough to click on this track and listen to it, which is, that's like getting to second base or third base, I guess, in baseball terms. Just I played a lot of baseball when I was a kid. Another notable thing about this is great example of a stinger ending, so pay special attention to that. Plenty of edit points in this track, but once again, you don't have to create edit points by using rests. Remember that gosh, I can't think of a great way to demonstrate it with just in this little frame I'm in. But if you don't want to cut in the dead air leading up to the beat, you want to cut right at the front of the beat. And this is a pretty horrible type of waveform to demonstrate that with anyway. But remember that you don't need rest. Rest may make it easier. Rest make it look more obvious on a waveform. So those are some positive aspects of using a rest. Oh, I made a note to notice how a subtle little eighth note thing that starts at 53 seconds is just one of those pro things to keep it interesting and moving forward. So without any further ado, let's listen to Histrionics. Great track. Okay, so let me see if I can isolate. Again, it's really hard to do. Like I said, I'm accessing a live video on a web page through my editing software while recording this live. Let me see. Okay. So, and I'm looking at a pretty small frame, so it's hard to see if I'm right up on it or not. Anyway, I'm going to play this and hope that you just hear BOM, which could be, I'm trying to demonstrate how to just take the stinger if you are the video editor and move it to somewhere that you need it. Oh. Got a little before it. Like I said, I'm working in miniature here. And I also wanted to check out at 119. This is like microscopically small. All right, coming right up, you're going to hear a super fast drum turnaround. Oh, I remember that thing. Where the heck did it go? I don't know. I'm going to hit play and see what happens. But there's this super fast drum turnaround that could either be included in an edit there or excluded. It's just a nice little thing to have. I think it comes right after this. Play it one more time for you. Here it comes. Anyway, I thought that was cool, and let me see if I can find some. Listen to how we go into the eighth notes at 53 seconds. Just keeps it interesting. Great edit point. Anyway, you get the idea. That's it. And now back to our regular programming. And there I am, as if by magic. All right. Questions? We have 15 minutes left. Wow. Hope you guys liked it. Now, the intro wasn't long for trailer music, Ken. I've always been a fan of short intros. Well, obviously in the 70s, 80s, when they used them to introduce a song or talk about a band coming to town for a concert or whatever, they wanted long intros. They wanted fade out so they could talk about it as well. Nowadays, in the record side of the music industry, people want the song to just get started. In the post world, most of the editors I know, which is a little different from advice that I've gotten from people, composers and library owners, but now editors want you to let them know what they're going to find inside of that lunchbox as soon as they open it. So when they hit play, I've got a friend named Biagio. He is a executive producer of a bunch of TV shows. He's also a composer. He did a thing at the Road Rally a couple of years ago, and we've talked about this extensively. He loves it when he hits play. He also is an editor and edits a lot of stuff on his own shows. So he loves it when he hits play, and instantly he knows what that piece of music has to offer. He doesn't have to wait through an intro. But this is a trailer, so you have the 3 acts. And the first act is setting the whole thing up. Maybe it's approaching a really spooky house or coming up on some sort of interplanetary space thing. Will I be putting this on for future reference? Yeah, it'll be on our YouTube channel. I hope that people use it for future reference. Do another show like this. It took me probably 4 hours on Friday to figure out how to get that stuff in this system and use it. It's good that I know now. Maybe I can do more stuff in the future that incorporates it. This will be a classic episode, yet only 100 people showed up for it. Because everybody thinks they know everything? I don't know. You would think, I guess they didn't know what to expect, although I did say that I would be playing audio and showing waveforms. And thank you to the library for letting me use this stuff. Maybe they'll make 67 cents from YouTube on it. I don't know. Question. I don't recognize those waveforms. That Logic Pro or Pro Tools, Cubase. No, actually, it is from Dropbox. That's how I got the stuff in here, was by using Dropbox. And actually, you know what? While other waveforms, I'm sure, are better for editing purposes, I really like the Dropbox waveforms. Are really good for showing developmental arc. By the way, Marion, do you now understand what an arc is? I one day had a taxi member a couple of years ago say, oh, I always thought that an arc was like a literal arc, like the arch in St. Louis. Of course, we have the Ark of the Covenant, which is shaped like that. But you know what I'm saying. It's like a story arc in a book or the story arc in a movie. It's something that is built into the timeline progression of a piece of art, whether it is literary or filmic or musical or whatever, and keeps it moving. the trajectory. Thank you, Ken Mesford. I know that, Marion. I was making a joke. Raiders of the Lost Developmental Arc. It's so frustrating when a screener hears something that is really good. I mean, clearly this person knows what they're doing, but maybe, it's 104 seconds of just no movement, no developmental arc. There's nothing about it that invites the editor in and goes, hey, baby, I'm what you need. And that's what you want. Yeah, a couple of these things, I was just amazed. I probably listened to each of these 10 times the other day. And a couple of times on each one of those pieces, I would just shut my eyes and sit here and listen with it cranked up pretty loud, and just going, oh my God, nobody's ever going to catch that on the show. I'm not sure I even caught it today, but just little things. And you know how I'm always saying, I learned this from my dad, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So it doesn't mean building in a lot of little, sexy little tricks and stuff in there to show how good you are at adding sexy little things. They're strategically placed ear candy that doesn't pop out as ear candy, yet gives forward motion to the piece. There you go. Yeah, I'm not so sure I would call the Dropbox thing a waveform, but whatever. I think it works really well for serving this purpose. I took a couple of them and dropped them into something that gave me a regular waveform, and I went, because I was trying to think of a way to pull that into the show. Then I realized the Dropbox stuff just looked better for this purpose. I want to remind you guys again, next week, 4 o'clock on Monday, Pacific time, I will be at Vanderbo's house with somewhere around a dozen unruly musicians. And I have no idea how this is going to go, but Vanderbo has a great channel on YouTube. He is self-taught at everything, including video editing, and he seems to have a real knack for it. His videos are informative and funny, but he's done 2 or 3 videos about taxi that he didn't tell me he was going to do. I didn't ask him to do it. I didn't ask him to do any of them. And there's some of the most informative videos about taxi from a third party. Unfortunately, I've gotten a couple of emails from members saying, oh yeah, a friend of mine saw that, thought you paid him and you won't cop to it. I didn't pay him a penny. He doesn't get anything. But I've been to his house in Nampa, Idaho before. I went there to do a taxi TV years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. It was before COVID. And I guess I just really like him as a person. We've become friends over the years. And this is my way of giving back. He once said to me, would you come up and talk to my group sometime? And so, yeah, did Matt Vanderbo get paid to make those videos? Well, that wasn't why he did them. I didn't know he was doing them. But I'm going to Nampa to give a little payback, a little love. Also, he interviewed me on Taxi TV a few weeks ago, and a lot of the questions, I could not believe the quality of the questions he was asking me. And a lot of those questions were generated from people in his group that I'm going to meet. So I really look forward to that. 2019 PC. Isn't it funny how, I don't know, it feels like it's been 2 years since COVID, right? And it's already been if you figure it was kind of over in 2022, so it's 3 years ago. I was at the grocery store and Costco on Sunday, and I don't know if it's just California, but there's still so many people out there wearing masks, even though eventually they said masks really don't do squat. Remember the NIH, National Institute of Health, one of those organizations said, yeah, the whole social distancing thing, 6 feet in a line, all that stuff, we just arbitrarily came up with that. And I understand they were under a lot of pressure because the world was panicked. It was going to be the Black Plague and everybody was going to die. So they had to give some comfort to citizens of the world by coming up with this stuff, but they knew it was BS at the time. So I kind of forgive them because they did it to give everybody a giant hug and say, don't be scared. But why are people still wearing masks at the grocery store? I saw a woman recently that was wearing gloves, mask, and a plastic face shield. Maybe she is the most germ-susceptible person on the planet. And if she is, my apologies, ma'am. Yeah, I missed the quarantines. I really enjoyed doing those. It was a daily challenge to come up with content. And as I've admitted before on the air, a lot of times I didn't come up with that content until about 3 minutes before the downbeat of the show. Yeah, maybe they are sick, except, I was at the grocery store yesterday, and if there were 50 to 75 people in that store, I would say 15 to 20 of them were wearing masks. I don't know. All right, any other questions, or shall we wrap this up because we're very close to the end of the show? I might end up editing some of these and making little standalone videos. It's a fashion statement. There you go. BFE, Ohio. I think I know what that means because I grew up in Illinois. We use that expression a lot too in the little farm town I grew up in. Road rally dates, Liz knows. I want to say it's November 6th through the 9th. You are welcome, you guys. Oh, I want to give you a quote. This has nothing to do with Taxi TV, but I saw it somewhere over the weekend. And I thought it was a great quote. This is from Winston Churchill. Effort is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that matters. One more time. Effort is not final. Well, I tried. Shouldn't be final. Failure is not fatal. I could think of a great joke there, but I'm not going to touch it. Effort is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that matters. And you know what? Matt Vanderbilt, bless his funny little heart, that must make him one of the most courageous people we know, because he failed at 2 things before he learned about doing instrumental music for film and TV. And he continued. And he's done really, really well. And I could not be happier for him, nor could I be more proud of him and grateful to have him as a member. All right, you guys, see you next week from Idaho for another exciting episode of Taxi TV. Bye-bye. Don't forget to like us. Tell your friends about the show. Oh, check us out, by the way, on Instagram and TikTok. We've been posting daily briefs every day. Bye.